Good day, everyone. For those of you joining my broadcast for the first time, welcome. I'm Asif Wasti, Trade Advisor at Export Development Canada, EDC. We're broadcasting live here in Ottawa, Ontario. Joining me on today's broadcast is Rob Pelletier.
Hi, everyone.
EDC's Chief Representative to the U.S. Rob has been with EDC for 17 years, starting at the age of 13, I assume. Most of that spent in corporate finance and most recently in our international business team focused on the U.S. market. Rob, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everybody watching.
Great. We'll take the next 10 minutes or so to answer a few recurring questions asked by Canadian exporters following the outcome of November 8th's U.S. presidential election. I want to first say, though, that it's still very early. It will take some time before we can see what policies this new administration will put into effect and any implications for Canada. What we do know is that Canada and the US have a very important relationship in trade. More than 35 states count Canada as their #1 sales market, with more than 1.7 million American jobs dependent on Canadian buyers. A look the other way, and we see that all provinces in Canada count the US as their #1 export destination. The US is our largest trading partner, and both countries have a vested interest in working together. So a great deal is at stake here for each country's economy when we speak of trade partnerships. My first question to you, Rob, is on NAFTA. The transition team for President-elect Trump this week released a portion of the administration's 200-day plan. Included in this plan was a recommendation for the renegotiation of NAFTA. If that's the case, how soon would Canadian businesses see an impact?
Well, that's a great first question, and thank you for that. I think, as you mentioned a bit in the preamble, I think speculating at this stage might be a bit premature. I mean, given a few things, one, the need to potentially renegotiate, and I think still we're a bit unclear on specific impacts. I think, though, that creates a bit of discomfort for people watching. We're hoping that I'd have a number of day answer. Unfortunately, I can't get that, but what I can give is perhaps a bit of comfort and perspective. I think there's three things that I have comfort with. Number one is the bilateral relationship you mentioned in the preamble. I think that there's an economic reality that exists that benefits both sides of the border, and I think as if free trade is amended or changed, obviously there's impacts. I think second is the established nature of supply chain. So the reality is that companies have just-in-time supply chains now, and disruption hurts everyone. And I think anyone living near the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, I've been to Windsor many times, knows this. The third thing I'd say from a comfort perspective is really what we're doing at EDC, and I think EDC is monitoring this closely. We have a great economics and political risk team that's keeping an eye on things and ready to step up as a corporation as need arises. As you mentioned, I've been with EDC 17 years. I started here when I was 12, not 13, and I've watched this as we've reacted to various shocks over the years in various sectors, and we've done a great job responding, and that's something I'm really proud of, being at EDC here this long. So confident that would be the case, depending on what happens in the future.
Great, thanks. Now, aside from the renegotiation or elimination of NAFTA, do you foresee any other changes in the near future which could impact Canadian exporters?
Yeah, another great question. I think that the one I get all the time is FX, so foreign exchange rates, U.S. Canadian dollar. We all have watched sort of over the last couple of years the changes that have happened there. I think that clearly depends on where you're sitting. If you're a company that has to import to export, you might have a different view of a lower dollar than a company that just strictly exports and benefits from a lower dollar. I think the good news for exporters, for those that don't know, is that EDC does a lot of job working with banks, so exporters banks, and we have foreign exchange guarantee vehicles that can help if hedging is a need. So something to be aware of and something that we can obviously offer and work with you on going forward if that's a concern.
Great, thanks. As I said at the beginning of this cast, 35 states count Canada as their biggest sales market, which illustrates the trade relationship we have. What are you hearing from your customers in these states about their views on procurement from Canada in the short to medium term?
Yeah, I mean, one of the roles that or tasks that I have at EDC is I'm relationship manager for about 20 key accounts, and also reach out to other companies as well, obviously. I think the conversations I've had with the majority of them, irregardless of sector, so these cut across various sectors, there's been one real common theme that sort of stuck with me, back to the question about procurement in Canada, and the one thing that I hear most often is about the Canadian brand and the strength of that brand. And And what that means to me, or what I've heard, is really the themes that keep coming up when I talk to companies are really three things. It's quality, so goods and services that they deliver. It's predictability of delivery, which is important to companies. And I think innovation. And those are the things that I think, from a value proposition that Canada has, that we have. And I think certainly in uncertain times, that's huge. I mean, having that value proposition is really important. And these companies are in established supply chains. When you talk to companies about their supply chains, there's processes and there's things that companies go through to get into those. So the ones that are in those now, I think again they have that high value proposition. I think, and as it relates to companies that are interested in that, we have opportunities at EDC to help make those introductions possible. That we do a lot of work with our global trade team on making those first introductions. So that's something to think about. The last thing, and then again, the original question was about sort of spend and what's what are companies thinking about, and I think it's really a matter of function of the markets. Companies sort of on the individual basis have their own plans, their own ideas. They might be in a various stage of of a project spend. So again, depends on where they are there more so than I think some of the other events. I think certainly, as I reached out, I was recently in the southwestern U.S. and there's some optimism now in the energy sector, which wasn't there a year ago. So those are the sorts of things that there's cautious optimism, but again, it's more of a case by case. And at the end of the day, again, I think the Canadian brand and what Canadian companies do. Oftentimes, I hear companies say, I really enjoy working with company X, and I wish I could offer them more and do more with them.
Okay, great, thanks.
Great.
And do you have any advice for Canadian exporters who are currently doing business with customers in the U.S. or have investments there?
Yeah, I think there's three things I would suggest. The first one is if you are a Canadian company and you have concerns, is to reach out. I mean, what EDC can offer is we have account managers across Canada. They're very well versed with our various risk mitigation products. So that's important. I think myself and in my role, what I have at the Ready Too is partners and networks. So we have people that we can reach out to, cross-border banks. So that's U.S. banks with a Canadian presence and Canadian banks with a U.S. presence. Tax experts, lawyers. So if that's a legitimate concern you have, let us know and we can connect you. Obviously, government organizations. So the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service across the United States, provinces as well have representations in the U.S. And my contacts as well at the U.S. Department of Commerce. So these are all really good, networking opportunities if you feel the need. And then there's also non-governmental organizations. So there's organizations that, Council of the Great Lakes Region comes to mind, that they're doing a lot of work on kind of improving trade relations and making trade easier across borders. They view the states and provinces that border the Great Lakes. I think if you take it together, it's the third largest economy in the world. So those are the sorts of people I'd look out for and reach out to. I think the second thing I think that's really valuable these days is patience. I think there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of speculation, and I would hate for companies to make regrettable decisions based on that. So I think patience if you can afford it. And the last thing I would say is something that we haven't talked about yet is global diversification. So if you have some concerns and you're looking to do more beyond the U.S., if that's kind of your only or primary market, again, we can be a good source for that. So we have people on the ground in nearly 20 markets at EDC and do business in over 200 countries. So that's something that can help with as well. So 3 pieces of advice I hope are helpful, and hope some of this has been valuable, certainly for the companies that have been out watching us.
That's great, Rob. Thanks for sharing insight and answering these questions today. I hope today's discussion was useful, helped provide some clarity as well. If you are interested in learning more on today's topic, please connect with me on Twitter or with Rob on LinkedIn. Thanks again, Rob, for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. So it's Asif Awasthi signing off Periscope. Until next time, thank you for watching and have a great day.